Managing the emotional roller coaster of foster care. 5 healthy coping skills. Tears are just streaming down my face. I'm holding this little foster baby I've had since she was 5 months old. Now she's 2, and I'm in this oversized leather chair, just watching my husband and her mom and kind of a family advocate person just unload everything that she owns into this home that she's going to be living in. Her mom has a transition home. She's done everything she's supposed to do. And this is the goal of foster care, is reunification. At that moment, it was nothing but devastating for me and for my family. I know I'm going to have to leave her there, but this little baby doesn't know yet. I understand I'm not alone in this type of experience. I do know firsthand the emotional roller coaster of foster care and how it can impact the health and the wellness of the entire family. And there are risk factors to watch for when we're getting really poor sleep. You know who you are that may have had nightmares in fostering or night terrors. There's not only the trauma the kids have experienced that you're managing, but also that secondary trauma that you can feel in caring for a child who has been abused, neglected, and so forth. The psychological stress of foster care, the ongoing unknown. Are the kids staying? What's going to happen at the next court hearing? All of these different types of situations. There's ongoing triggers for your family as well if you've had a history of fostering, managing the pain, the loss, and the grief whenever there is an upcoming transition, when the transition is happening, and then after the transition. Of course, all relationships are affected. Your marriage and even the dynamics between the children. There is another risk factor that you wouldn't maybe expect a lot of times, of maybe beginning to overeat or pouring another glass of wine and that type of thing. Just unhealthy sorts of coping skills that people use when they're feeling really emotional. Lack of support. This is a big one in foster care. A lot of foster families feel alone and isolated, and especially with the COVID situation, it only made it more isolating. You also can recognize if you're at risk because your emotions can also impact your employment. If you feel like you're having crying spells, or maybe have to call in because you're just too upset or struggling too much because of what's happening. And there's those times that maybe you have to take off with different sorts of schedules, visitation, things that didn't seem to get worked out, and ultimately it's falling on the foster family, which can even lead to job loss. Although the risk factors are not an exhaustive list, I think it's pretty clear that these emotions that we deal with in fostering can affect every part of our lives. And so why I feel managing emotions is an important topic for foster families is because it's so much tied to how we parent. And of course, each of our thoughts and our feelings can contribute to those ongoing emotional states that we're operating from as parents. And when we're interacting with a kiddo that has a traumatic background, we really need a trauma-informed way of handling our own emotions in order to deal with what they're going through in a healthy way. Giving them healthy coping skills and utilizing those in our own life to navigate whatever is the unexpected of fostering, and without the anxiety that can come along with it. As a foster and adoptive parent, I know we all desire to be more responsive than reactive. And for instance, a reaction would be a teen that mouths off and says something very rude, and a reaction would be that quick, snappy back, raise our voice type of reaction, where a response is something that we have chosen to be kind of in this balance with our emotion and logic, where we're able to operate in more of a wise mind And that's more of a dialectical behavioral skill, but it is something that we choose, and it's not just a default. And our shared goal is really to be the best parent that we can for these children that have been entrusted to us, that we would model and we would be teaching them in our care. You probably want to know a little about me since I'm teaching the class. I think it's important just to have a little bit of a sense of my background as a child as well. I, as a child, was bounced around, primarily being raised with my grandparents due to my parents' addiction issues. I have a sister who is 11 years younger than I am, who went into foster care and was adopted by her first foster caregivers, fortunately. I've been married to my husband, Dwayne Stark, for 17 years. He's an Oregon State Representative in House District 4, which we work together closely in the legislature. I've been a foster mom for over 13 years, so I really do get it. A mother of 9 children currently. I'm an adoptive mom of 3. We're currently fostering 4 children, and I have 2 by birth. I have been in private practice as a counselor for 11 years, and I specialize in consulting, serving and supporting foster and adoptive families and the agencies that work with them. The reality of foster care. The reason why I serve foster and adoptive parents and the agencies that work with them is because I see that the need is so great. And I think most, are aware that there are too few homes for how many children are in care. And because the need is so great, the workers are few. This has led me to want to serve those families that are willing to take on these children and to do whatever I can to support and provide, resources and things for those families. And it's so dear to my heart to think that there are actually in my home state of Oregon, 8,000 children in care in foster, and there's over 200 of them that are just waiting to be adopted. And in the United States, there are 400,000. There's well over 400,000 if you count birth through 21 years old, because a lot of youth that you're likely aware, they're not just immediately ready sometimes when they come in care in their later ages to move out at 18. And so there are those instances where they do need maybe an independent living plan or some sort of guardianship to get them through and to kind of get them on their feet. And it may take longer because of their background. My goal is not only to recruit, but to retain the few workers that we have. I think it's important to have a roadmap to be able to see what exactly we're going to be covering today. And so as far as the healthy coping skills, we're going to holistically address the physical, the mental, emotional, spiritual, as well as an overall big picture philosophy of fostering. So the first component we're going to address is the physical. And we're going to just kind of cover things you probably are aware of, but applying them is something else. And so I always think it's important to go over the importance of taking care of our body because it is our vessel for fostering. And so having a vitamin, taking supplements as they're needed, I in practice have seen many people oscillating emotionally because they're low in vitamin D or they have some other issue with their blood work that they hadn't identified previously. And so it is important to get, an annual checkup, the labs for blood work and things to see, are there things that need addressed in order to balance them out? It's important to work with your primary care physician as in regards to any medication that may be needed. Of course, they're the ones that are able to do blood work and they can see if you're low in different sorts of things like vitamin D and, checking your blood pressure and all these other things, because our stress levels do affect our bodies as well as the hormones that are kicked out. And for all of these reasons, it's really important to stay in contact with your doctor and stay on top of your own health. As far as nutrition, I think it's really important to think about your food like medicine, because you can look at your plate and think, would this be a depressant or an antidepressant? There are the crashes when it comes to sugars, and of course, protein is really important to get more consistently throughout the day in order to keep your emotions level. And of course, taking in the proper amount of water. All of these things do impact our ability to show up in the best possible way. Exercise, the one we hear about, and it's the ongoing one that we have to practice. It absolutely helps with all of our hormones, our endorphins, helps us manage our mood better. Sleep is another one that is incredibly important to really get a good hygiene around as far as a habit. And as adults, it may feel a little bit funny to think of having a bedtime, though our body really does function best when it has the circadian rhythm kind of anticipating, okay, I about go to bed at 10 at night and I about get up at 6 in the morning, something along those lines. We can start dimming the lights shortly before bed, and our body will naturally kick up things like melatonin, and our cortisol levels kind of shift on their own throughout the day, starting high and decreasing over the day. Of course, changing out any blue lights or doing anything where we're, watching right up until we fall asleep, some sort of a TV show or something, gets us stimulated with what we're hearing and what we're seeing and all of that. And so it's really good to kind of shut that stuff down at least, a half hour before bed, just to kind of get in that routine around our sleep. I'm going to do a deep breathing exercise with you that my clients tend to love. And so I'm going to have you just very kind of as you're comfortable, keeping your feet both on the ground, almost like a tree planted, rooted there, kind of feeling whatever you're sitting on, holding you, just kind of getting into your body, noticing your breaths. So I'm going to have you just very kind of quietly, put your one hand on your chest and one hand over your belly. And now I'm just going to have you notice the way that you're breathing for kind of a minute here. I'm just going to have you relax, kind of breathe, and just notice. And now I'm going to have you focus on your hands themselves. So as you're breathing in and breathing out, I want you just to notice which hand may be moving more. Your upper hand or your lower hand. For some people, they say they kind of move a little bit together. So for those of you that feel their upper hand moving more, that's what we call chest breathing, kind of that shallow kind of breathing that tends to come with more anxiety and just busyness in life. And what we want is to move toward diaphragmic breathing, which is when we breathe in, that we're breathing out a little bit longer, trying to blow off that CO2. We don't want that carbon dioxide in our body. The oxygen that we're breathing in, we don't want to over-oxygenate, which can happen when we're in that real shallow chest breathing. The goal with diaphragmic breathing is to breathe out a little bit longer, and just some people will say things like breathe in 7, breathe out 11, those sorts of things. I have had a number of clients that are overachievers that count to the T, or like have a little bit more with it, and they can kind of get lightheaded here. So what I like to say is, with your pattern of breathing, I would just say the exhale should be a little longer than you're used to, just slowly focusing on breathing out more, because our body will get the air as we need it. The breathing in part isn't so much the breathing technique, but more the breathing out part. so we don't over-oxygenate. Mental. Thoughts are things. They can tear you down or give you wings. I actually don't know who said this. I've heard this multiple times. I tried to find out who it was. But it's so key to think about when we have a thought, something negative about ourselves, then we feel the feelings that follow. When we have a thought that gives us a sense of achievement or confidence, and then those feelings follow. So you really want to think about what you're thinking about. In counseling practice, one of the main therapy techniques is the cognitive behavioral therapy when it comes to working through negative thoughts. And what it looks at is this interplay of belief systems, what thoughts may come out of those, what the feelings are, and what actions we're taking. And it isn't an A to Z necessarily. As we have a thought, there may be a feeling that follows, or it may be out of the feeling that we may be having a thought. But there are multiple areas we can interrupt in our lives in what we're thinking about, to what kind of dwelling we're doing in the different feelings, to the action steps. So one of the things I wanted to focus on today with this talk is around the way we're speaking to ourselves. And something I often will tell my clients is to talk to yourself like you would your best friend, being encouraging and positive, loving and gracious, all of those things that you would do if your friend was having a bad day. You would be supportive. And so we, in our kind of the tape that we're playing is the self-talk. If you think about what you're thinking about throughout the day, that will help you managing your emotions. And you want to pay attention to things that might be hot links. So an example of a hot link would be telling yourself, I should do this. Immediately we feel the feelings that follow the shoulds, and they're negative feelings. Talking down to ourselves, you idiot. How could you do that? Why did you do that? Those sorts of things we want to avoid. So be really aware in general to how we can kind of get stuck in a loop with certain thinking. So maybe when we're feeling anxious and we start getting those ruminating thoughts, they come and then they come and then they come, and we can't quite turn it off. And sometimes those things are negative thoughts, and we want to be able to replace that. So there's a couple different techniques. Different therapists have different styles. One of the things that I have heard many therapists use is kind of a thought stopping technique. And it can be, every time you have the thought, it's almost like you imagine this big, red game show type X that it's like, like, don't think that. Personally, that's not worked in my own life, where I might say, stop thinking about it. Don't think about it. It's like, don't think about a purple elephant. Stop thinking about a purple elephant. So even if I wasn't really thinking about one, now I am. So what I prefer is more of a thought replacement system, which is more of the cognitive behavioral therapy technique. And so the tool being where you can list out as you're having those different thoughts of, gosh, what a failure, you did this again, whatever those thoughts are, where you can actually start replacing them with truth. And it needs to be, even if it's not a positive truth, but even a neutral truth is better than a negative thought that's keeping you stuck and feeling dejected. So what you want to do in order for this to be effective is to actually make a list of what your negative thoughts are. Sometimes, there's the in-between too, what situation brought it about. You could look at what, the triggers were. You could write out what the thought was. You could kind of go more in depth with this, but I'm only kind of just keeping it into the two columns, where in the, say right-hand column, you come up with things. If it's not from you specifically, you can't replace it. So if I believe, or the thought is I'm fat, then just saying I'm thin isn't going to work. Okay. It has to be something that is based in truth. And sometimes it is if you've taken steps toward a particular goal. So if the thought was I'm fat, I got up that morning, I went for a walk, I ate some healthy breakfast, then the thought replacement may be I'm not where I want to be in my body, and I'm working on it. I'm taking steps. I ate a healthy breakfast. I went for my walk. So the way that I talk to myself, the way I feel shifts. And so I don't have to feel like I'm to the point saying, you're sexy, and believe it if I'm just not there. So I think a lot of times affirmations, when they're not effective, is when it's too far of a stretch, where I don't actually believe it. I'm telling myself something that I don't actually believe. It's hard to get on board with that. So make sure that it's true. And if you really need some help with this, you might even call on some help from some people around you, because say, you have a certain thought, I am so disorganized. It may be talking to a good friend of yours and saying, can you name some things about me that might, counteract this? Have you seen certain skills or seen different things in my life that might encourage me in this? And you might find the people around you look at you very differently than the way you look at yourself. And so that can also be helpful, or even having somebody write out some things so that you can kind of go back over them when you're feeling really low, so that you can, if it's not your truth, it is a truth from someone that loves you, that's close to you. Emotional. Emotions are natural, both the positive and the negative. And although that may seem obvious, I think in different cultures, there's this tendency to want to always put on the happy face, and things are fine and good, and not as typical are they not going well, or you're feeling terrible. So sadness and tears, even lack of interest, I could fill in a number of negative things, are a natural tendency. And I think it's important that we leave space to have healthy expression of the different emotions that we're feeling. What does healthy expression of emotions look like? It looks like being able to talk about what's going on, to write about events, to be able to kind of process what the mood is around what's going on. And in that way, you can get it outside of yourself. I think that it's important, just like going to a counselor or talking to a friend, that if you were, say, putting it in a journal, it's still getting it outside of yourself, so you can look at it more objectively and be able to process what exactly are your fears. What are the things that you're telling yourself about those events, and even to prioritize what the concerns are. Sometimes it can help turn down your frustration. In other instances, it might turn it up because you realize how much it's really affecting you. It's still key to be able to get to the root of what you're feeling. When you are feeling really emotional, I like to encourage you to practice self-comforting behaviors, just like you would if you were sick. You might put on your terry cloth robe, light a candle, make a cup of tea, maybe it's a long hot bath, put in a funny show. All of these sorts of things, taking a walk, can help to kind of relax our emotions, to be able to help us just comfort ourselves and calm. And so in addition to journaling, which is the tool that I want to encourage, writing out the events and what the feelings are, also practicing things to comfort those feelings. We've addressed physical, mental, and emotional. I think the one that is often left out is the spiritual component. And it's so important that I did not want to do a disservice by leaving it out. It is, I think of it like my well. Instead of giving you a little drink of water, this is my source that helps me to continue in the work that I'm doing. So one of the things that kind of ties in with the mental and emotional aspects is our thoughts that we had discussed. Scripturally, take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. In our negative thinking, I think it's important to think about what kind of spiritual attack you may be experiencing, and in that sense to lean into the Lord in addressing whatever the issue is. So kind of the tools that I use to navigate the spiritual realm of myself is practicing prayer. And this may be 1 minute prayers just all day long. And I have kind of rote things that I may say. They sound silly in some senses, but they give me so much strength to say things like, Lord, give me wisdom, give me strength, give me all that it takes. I say that often in homeschooling and parenting 9 children. I do a daily devotion, and that's just a little bit of time each day that I set aside to sit and do a little bit of reading and listen for what God is guiding me in. And so it may look different for you if, depending on your spiritual background, you might do more of a meditative practice, music, different things that people use. Meditation, the way that I think about it being, if you're sitting down and you're quieting your mind, for me, so often all the thoughts just continue to flood in. So it can help in practice when I'm walking people through a meditation to almost imagine you're at a movie theater and it's just all you can see is the screen all around you, and you pick a color and say your color's orange. You may just focus on that orange, and every time the thought starts to come in again, you kind of refocus your mind back onto that orange color, and you just kind of focus on your breath as you're looking at the color. And so that's one example. Some people use a mantra. They might breathe in and say let, and then as they breathe out, they say go. And so each time, kind of to manage their anxiety, they're just kind of closing their eyes, breathing in, let, breathing out, go. Different kind of meditative things along those lines. I know there's lots of apps that help guide meditation for people that a lot of individuals enjoy. So whatever it is for you that's connecting you to the source. And for me, it has been incredibly important to get connected in a church body, to have other believers that I can lean into, asking for prayer, to be able to come together and just share life because they're like-minded. And, you know, when you have a big family, having other big families that get it can be super helpful. So just be gentle and kind with yourself, extending grace as God is gracious. And this is one of the verses I love that I put on here from 2 Corinthians 12, 8 and 9. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So this is huge. When we are feeling weak, we can draw on that strength. We talked about with cognitive behavioral therapy how we all kind of hold a belief system. Thoughts, feelings, and actions are all interplay. Well, holding a healthy mindset or philosophy in fostering a child is kind of that core as we go about everything that we do that we're operating from. So what's been really helpful for me is keeping that mentality that it's really focused on what is best for the child. We are working with DHS as kind of a team, and the goal being, as you're fostering, to return to parent is always the primary goal. And so just keeping in mind that that child is there, if only for a short time, for you to love on and to pour into. We don't get to control the outcome, but we do get to show up for that child that's in need in whatever capacity is needed, for as long as it's needed. So my belief is God has a plan for every child, for the birth family as well as for your family, and that God wants good things for all involved. And so what I will do on a regular basis is to just pray over whatever the difficult situations are. I can't always see clearly what the best outcome would be, or, you know, what I even want to pray about. So I'll just pray God's will over the situation, and that helps me kind of let go of what is happening in the case. In all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And that's Romans 8:28. And that's a promise that I hold on to and has carried me through many difficult situations of transitioning and letting go, and kind of big events throughout fostering. So one of the tools I want to offer today is, if you are in one of those difficult situations, you had to send a kiddo home, you don't know how it's really going, you're concerned about their welfare, their safety, and you have your own questions and concerns that maybe weren't fully addressed, I, in that time, would encourage you to practice some sort of positive imagery. And so that's holding a positive mental image that would give you feelings of calm and relaxation. So for me, when I sent home the baby girl that I was telling you about, whenever I would maybe have a negative thought, like, what if she's crying out for me, are her needs really being met, or whatever those thoughts were, I would replace that with her getting her needs met, her being happy, being reunited, that they were doing what they needed to do as parents. And this just helped, because really the opposite would just wreck me and keep me stuck in sadness and turmoil. So there is no point. There's nothing good coming out of it. So I may as well focus on what is good unless I know otherwise. So just replace that little movie clip. Whatever negative thing you run through your mind, you gotta switch it. So back to that situation of leaving the baby, it was nearly a year, and I had been involved. We were able to see her. She had 2 younger siblings over the course of the time that she was back with her birth parents, and her and those 2 siblings are now living with us. So it just goes to show we really don't know what is going to come to pass. And it's really important to just keep an open mind and an open heart to not knowing what is supposed to be or what's going to be, and just doing the best we can in each situation. Given the highs and lows of child welfare cases, we have plenty of opportunities to practice managing our emotions. And of course, the holistic health kind of model with our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, as well as our core philosophy that we're operating from. And so if you feel overwhelmed because, oh my goodness, that is so many things to be thinking about, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and my philosophy, then don't be, because you only need to choose one thing right now to get you started in the right direction. Now, taking action, you get to pick your greatest need, whatever it is that maybe you've neglected more than any other part of your health, and you get to schedule it in your calendar for this week. So what I am asking you to do, my challenge, is to create a weekly calendar, and whatever that one new healthy habit is that you can implement, it might be a practice of deep breathing on a morning and evening, or maybe making note of whatever those negative thoughts are so you can practice that positive self-talk. Journaling, prayer, devotion, positive imagery. You get to pick whatever those things are that you feel like you want to grow in your life and follow through on that. And so make it really specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. That's kind of the SMART goal you've probably heard of. And find an accountability partner that's going to help keep you on track. And I do want to say this could be something you revisit weekly, and it may look different. You may be doing really great with drinking water and getting your exercise, and then you're kind of falling off in some other area, and so you want to work back to drinking your water regularly and exercising, or whatever that thing is. And so in general, just kind of addressing what is the greatest need for you. All right, now you're taking action. So what's next? Finally, I want to encourage you to just connect with some sort of foster parent community for support. You may be in a really great place right now, and that is something that you're able to both give and receive from. And just keeping in mind that there are tips and resources, and people ask their questions, and it can be such a wealth of information when you're connected. And Facebook groups all over the place. It could be like in my state, we have an Oregon one. I'm sure that depending on wherever you're from, there's probably a group put together. If not, you could put one together. But I would absolutely encourage you to do that. You can follow me on Facebook if you want any ongoing tips and resources for foster families, or you could send me your email if you want to be updated on my foster care book launch. My contact information for my business is listed on the slide here, as well as my email. Feel free to just shoot me a message if you want to give me feedback or say hello. And you are welcome to friend me on Facebook. Let me know you're a foster family. It's just dear to my heart to be able to be connected. And just bless you for everything that you do for children in need.